Okay, hi guys, welcome to round 4 of UADC. My name is Jay. I'm from UT Mara. I'll be your single chair for the round. These are my trainees.
I'm Lisa from UTLB.
I'm Sarah with LLC. Alright, okay, you all know now all your things and rules and all that. Okay, without further ado, I'd like to invite the Prime Minister to start the debate here.
Here. Political parties are inherently ideological. It's the guiding factor in the values of the politicians, what guides the laws that they will legislate, and the values that they have in discussions in Congress. That's exactly why it's so important for democracies to have this, and so important that we have distinguishments between those parties, right? Under our assumption and under our context, we are the new majority with a legitimate opposition who are from the incumbent party. We're the former opposition party who came into power via an election, and we think that is already indicative of the people's loss of trust to the former party and the shift of the population sentiment towards our party, right? Our stance is very simple. We don't think that we should associate with the members of the incumbent party. We shouldn't be accepting members who are jumping from their party to ours. We have to prioritize the quality of legislation that happens within our state, and that only occurs when you have delineations between ideologies, when you have checks and balances in discourse in Congress. We cannot stand for a form of government ruled by a monolithic party full of yes men, right? Our goals are twofold then. Firstly, we have the short-term goal, where you get better legislation and quality legislation. We think that's based on the discourse that you get, and if the result of the legislation was born out of a compromise among people. Because we do recognize that there can be, for example, members of the former party who are still voted upon by a minority of people. We think their sentiments are still valid again. The second long-term goal is towards the re-election of us as this party, right? We think we need to keep our voter base, we need to keep them pleased, we need to show them that we are standing with our principles, and we also need a multi-sectoral approach because we recognize that our voter base are not the only people in our democracy. We have to take into consideration and take into account the minorities as well, right? There are going to be 3 arguments that I'm going to argue. Firstly, right, what will the public or what will the voters see if we do accept members from the incumbent party? That's going to seem like a consolidation of power by the newly elected ruling party, and that will ultimately lead to a loss of trust. Why? Because the party was elected for their ideology, which is distinguished from the incumbent party, right? Accepting members from the former party shows 2 things. That firstly, we as the new ruling party, the new majority in Congress, don't care about ideology. That we ran on a platform to get us elected, but we don't really care if the members of our party follow that, because we have to go back to the characterization that parties are inherently ideological. So it's not just like a group of people that we want to be together, right? So secondly, we think our ideology isn't as strong if it's muddled with people who have done things and said things and have legislated things that were contrary to our beliefs on the first place. That ultimately diminishes our interest, which is towards the tenure in office for our party that's able to attain the goals that we need trust of the electoral base to be elected again and to be able to pass and legislate laws that will take time to legislate, right? In conclusion, we think that's a betrayal of the people who believed you and elected you if you do accept these members of the former incumbent party. Yes.
Isn't it far more likely that as an opposition party, you just came to power, you're far more likely to be smart about it and not accept just anyone out there? You're far more likely to accept specific individuals who are defecting, who are far more likely with your ideological basis.
Okay, that is true. So for example, we pick the smartest person of that incumbent party, right? But that smartest person is still ideologically different from yours. So for example, the person in that incumbent party is conservative, believes that abortion shouldn't be a right that women have, but you're a party that believes that reproductive health is important. It's inherently incompatible. That is not to say that we hate that person, because we recognize and respect the discussion that they will have with us in Congress. But that is to say that for our party, which is different from who we are or what we are as Congress, we cannot stand with them, right? Secondly, we think accepting members from the opposition party increases the likelihood of forming a hegemony in the legislature, right? What happens in the Philippines, for example? You have former liberal women. Like for example, You have a senator who was formerly pro-reproductive health. You have a senator who's the first trans woman in Congress who was former for LGBT rights. But the moment the ruling party became PDP Labat, they switched to the ruling party and remained mum about the advocacies that they ran on. We think that was indicative of their interest to hold on to power rather than to hold on to the platforms they ran on because they know it's unstrategic. In a democracy or in a Congress that is full of conservatives who hate women, who are all yes men, they knew that it wasn't strategic to maintain with those ideologies. Therefore, they switched to what was strategic for them. Right? Even with those elected politicians from incumbent parties, we think it's going to be acceptable, right? We think it's going to be possible for us as a new party to transition and to have our bills passed. Because the motion assumes that we are now at par, or not necessarily the majority, but we are at par at least, and we can compete with the incumbent party, right? We think we're willing to take the trade-off that even if it takes longer to legislate, even if, for example, instances of filibustering happens and things like that, at the very least, there's a chance of our bill being passed. That is something firstly representative, that we have to recognize that although the opposition is lobbying for something that we are against, that is a view that the people have and the people elected and must be respected. But secondly, that law was born out of a discourse and a compromise. That means that it's the best form of legislation that we can get, right? So what it simply means is, as the ruling party, we cannot accept basically on what's convenient for us, on what gets us numbers, and what gets us strategic, because that's not necessarily aligned with what's our ideological principle to begin with, right? So in conclusion, we think you diminish the quality if you accept those members of that party, because it no longer becomes representative and it no longer becomes a product of discourse, and that ultimately diminishes the value of democracy in our context, right? But lastly and thirdly, you have to protect the legacy of your party. You have to remember the context that this is the first time the opposition has finally become at par with the incumbent party. You're the ones making history for that nation. Your goal is then to strengthen your democracy, your ideology, and credibility means that you cannot easily be overturned or questioned by future generations, right? So in a hegemonic political discussion rather, where people vote on the basis of what keeps them in power rather than what they represent and what they ran on, we think that their vote becomes highly tokenistic and not credible. It's so much easier, for example, for future generations of that Congress to overrule those because they know that those things were only voted upon because their predecessors voted on it in order to stay in power, because that was what's popular then and not necessarily what's representative and good for the people, right? In conclusion, we don't think we cannot stand for a form of government that accepts party hoppers, even if we are the majority, and we think we're still in defense of keeping discussions at best and keeping discussions at the most possible representative manner that it could be.
Thank you very much. I would like to invite the leader for Is that the ballot? No, it's okay. I know your names. I can do it for you. You're so sweet. I can do it for you.
Ready?
Yes. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, the way I see it, in government think that when this new party comes into power, their main incentives is to establish some ideological foothold in a country that's probably not ready for it. They say that it's okay to prioritize ideologies and take as long as it may take to get these bills passed, as long as you sort of feel holier than thou and establish some sort of philosophical establishment in that country. But understand a number of things in this. What do these countries look like? These are not countries that are ready for some nuanced view of left-wing politics. These are countries that are probably been ravished by a long dynastic politics and a voter base that is extremely impatient and wants results. This is a voter base that is bought into your promise of change, probably without knowing what this change looks like, because this election was probably a populist election in which a very angry voter base voted for you expecting some vague idea of results. They don't know what these results look like, but they want these results to be presented to them on a silver platter. Additionally, they want those results quickly. So if you take very long to pass these bills, as they say they're willing to take in the EVNF case, that will not do if this new party, wants to stay in power for a number of reasons. First and foremost, most of the resources in the country still belong to the incumbent party. So even if you won the votes, and if you can somehow get the bills passed in Congress, passing legislation and executing legislation are extremely different things. Bills get passed in third world countries all the time, but they very rarely get implemented on a ground level. For this, you need people who have the resources and the capital and the experience, things that might only come from people who are part of the party that was in power before. Additionally, ladies and gentlemen, they say that these new politicians will come in and completely revolutionize your party and make your party lose its ideological base. That is not true. They completely misconstrue now its POI. When they said that this party is smart in the way they pick politicians, not pick the smartest politicians. Important characterization. If we're a party that's very easy on abortion, we won't take someone that denies abortion rights entirely. We probably take someone who has a moderate view on abortion, not someone who has a completely polar opposite view on our party. That does not work at all. Additionally, it's important to understand that this debate probably happens in a third world country where political ideologies themselves are quite murky, and most politicians don't have clearly outlined ideologies that are so important to stick to. Additionally, for most of these parties, the biggest incentive is producing results such as giving food and basic jobs and education to the population, which is far more important because the population on the ground probably don't care about far left and far right politics and the differences between them. The biggest example is from my country, Bangladesh, which despite being a Muslim majority country, is perfectly fine with both parties having female leaders because these female leaders get results and get work done. So even though this opposes the ideology of the masses, the female leaders, because they produce the results, are accepted. So for this party, whose incentive is probably re-election as they themselves claim, and this party whose incentive is self-preservation and establishment of their own strong foothold, for them the priority is results, none of these things that they said. Therefore, their case does not stand in this house today. First and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, if you accept that the incentive is to appease the supporters and produce results, is to maintain self-preservation and create your own legacy, then understand some of the things you need. You need resources. So you're probably a young party full of people who are who are capable of giving out brash speeches and motivating people, and that you win an election. However, the party that was in power for 10, 15 years, a number of things you don't. A, they have resources. Because this party is a dynastic political party, has nepotism and probably has family politics ingrained, this means politicians in this party probably own most of the important businesses. If they don't own them outright, they probably have important stakes in these businesses, and they can actually control the flow of money into your party. Sit down, then ask for later. If you take these politicians, some of them through, you get access to this money that you would not otherwise get. This finances are extremely important for a poor party in a poor country, which you probably accept that this country is. Additionally, many of these politicians have social influence. It's important to understand that not all politicians in that incumbent party are rejected outright. Their characterization in the party as a whole is rejected. Ignores the fact that most countries are built up of several hundred voter bases and several hundred small divisions. And it's impossible that each and every one of these divisions actually rejected the politicians outright. Additionally, many of these individuals are liked because of who they are as people and not the banner under which they stand for elections. Which means the social capital that many of these politicians might bring will actually help our party expand our own social capital, but more on this later. Additionally, and most importantly, understand how these incumbent parties function in third world countries. Whenever a corrupt government is in power for a very long time, they fill the wings of government, the bureaucracy, the administration, the police, the military, the ministries with their own people, which means even if you come into power, all of these wings of government are now have a flood of people aligned with the previous party. These are the people who will implement the legislation that you pass in Congress. If you do not have these people on your side, it's literally impossible for you to implement these laws in real time and on the ground level. These are people you can get on your side if you accept those party-hopping politicians, because these bureaucrats and these administrators are people you need on your side. Finally, you have the issue of foreign connections. If you have a party that's in power for a very long time, many of the foreign connections your country might have is probably contingent on certain individuals who are part of those parties. For example, if someone got a knighthood in your country, that individual can probably help you accelerate relationships in that kingdom. A very simple example. If those people exist in the incumbent party and you can bring them over to your party, this accelerates you, and this makes your cause of producing results for the country easier. Additionally, ladies and gentlemen, understand finally, on the ground level, many of these politicians will still have rampant fan followings. Also, ladies and gentlemen, with the impact of all these resources, let's come over to our second argument on how these politicians will be chosen. Before that, yes.
The expenditure for legislation doesn't come from party funds. It comes from government budget granted to you when you're elected. So how is that a problem?
Because these funds create jobs, these funds create businesses that are important to produce results that the people want to. You want a businessman in your country on your side if you want to, if you want to provide jobs that are one of the most important results you can give to a poor population. But more and more so on how you choose politicians. Understand, if there are 14 voting zones in your country and you want 10 of them, you will not accept party hopping politicians in the 10 strong zones. You will accept them in the 4 zones that you lost states, which means that your supporters know that these people are being lost anyway. So taking these people in doesn't harm you. But additionally, your core supporters will, even if they are upset at this at first, if you can produce results over time, it's not hard to win them over. Because understand, again, in a poor country, the most important thing is to produce results. But additionally, because you are a party that won the election, you're not an idiot. You'll actually probably vet these people much stronger. Additionally, because you have power, you have the license to pick and choose the politicians you want to take, which means they cannot strong arm you, you can strong arm them. For these reasons, you can pick and choose and then take advantage of the vast resources that they provide, use that to produce results, and then appease the voter base and increase your self-preservation. Now it will come in, Kazi will come in and show you how usurpers and builders have different characteristics and how we need both of these things in parties. We are very, very proud to propose.
Thank you very much. Ifya? Gita? Do you have a certificate? And a pen. You have pens? One second. Thank you very much. Thank you.
The reason why the incumbent party probably lost its power is because people have found that the elitist view of the businesses that control the politicians is no longer a sustainable way to be governed as a people. That's why we've turned to an opposition party. At worst, it is a populist party. It is a party that ought to represent the voices of the people, not the voices of the businessmen who have access to the ruling elite who have been overthrown now. We say that in this debate, there are multiple questions that we need to answer. The first is, why should we not accept these individuals? And we need to first analyze who are these individuals who are willing to shift parties. Note that the individuals are probably not the top line individuals who have access to all power from the incumbent power. So it is unlikely that these are the people who rule those parties and have access to all those businesses or have access to majority control within that incumbent party. On the other hand, what is likely to be the characterizations of the individuals that will jump ship to your party are individuals who are probably new to that incumbent party, people who are probably seeking to just maintain their own position of power without any ideological backing or any clear support for a particular person. But it also means that these individuals probably don't have the same access to the resources the opposition claims in this debate. And that is true because if they are new, obviously they won't be trusted with that level of power or political resources that the whole party of that incumbent has. So you say that the likely scenario is the people that we will be accepting or selecting from are not the people that we get on their side. But let's assume that it is the top level officials in this incumbent party. Why do we say that we don't want to accept them? We say this in multiple levels. The first is you need to analyze that this person is branded as a distrusted incumbent because people don't just vote based on parties. They also vote on the people that represent that party. So the problem here is that the reason why they're probably not re-elected is because one, the party in itself is problematic, but also because these people are also inherently problematic in and of themselves. So we say that if one, the party, as according to opposition, holds these resources when these top level officials transfer, it is unlikely that they will still have the same access to those resources, but it is unlikely that we'll also be able to steer those resources in favor of us as a new opposition party. But we say that they are still, what they carry over, however, is the branding, that they came from a party that is distrusted in the public, and we say that as an opposition party, we should distance ourselves. But if it is true that they bring with them their business connections, we say we don't want those business connections, because that means that we as the party are now susceptible to the same elitism and business desires that the old party was associated with. We think that if these politicians are in the hands of major businesses, we as a new political party should not be in the hands of these businesses, but we need to be in the hands of the people that voted us in the first place. We say that when we create that image for ourselves because we associate with these other turncoat people, we say that's more harmful to us. But we say that the reason why we don't want these corrupt politicians as well in our party is because now they have a say as to what we should do as a party. They have a say and a voting right in terms of the policies that we want to forward, and we don't think we need that type of influence within our party. So we say that now we are not at that position to blur our image. We think that one, it is not just about the results outright, but it's about the stability of our party. And when we have undue influence from businesses that are bad and just want to corrupt the whole funds that we have as a legislative or as a party, we say we should not be associated with people who are in these pockets. But second, we say that if this debate is all about change, and that is the goal that opposition just wants to debate in this wants to deal with in this debate, we say that we can still create change under our side. Note how there is no analysis as to how change is impossible under our side. He just said it's difficult. And we say that a lot of the times, the sustainable change that you want to create is difficult. When you require across the border lines of consensus building and multi-sectoral approaches to these types of social welfare programs, you don't need just a solid voice, but you need a voice that is questioned to prevent the tyranny of our own party. And we say that when we are able to be tyrannical, that is when we're not able to create the best policies, because we are surrounded by our own echo chamber, unquestioned by an opposition party or unquestioned by any other interest group. And we say that the reason why we should preserve those those opposition groups, even from the incumbent party, is because there is some level of questioning towards us. But we say that if we don't create change for social institutions or the political institutions that are there, we say if we continue to be controlled by the businesses and we continue to be controlled by corrupt politicians and corrupt businessmen, you are unlikely to get the social welfare changes that opposition wants in this debate. Because if now we have a majority and that we have the power of the purse and the power of the sword, in as much as some incumbent party members still have hold on power, we say we still have the same amount of leverage to get forward our social institutions without having to need to overhaul our image or to even create a super majority. We just need some level of majority, which we say we currently have. They said that, you know what, this is probably a populist country. And we say that maybe that's true. And that means that we have the social capital to get our interests forwarded without necessarily accepting new politicians. So we say that because of that social capital that exists, it is not necessary that we have these new individuals because we have people on the ground. But if it is true that these politicians do want to help our party, then they will help us even if they are not in our party. And we say that they can vote in favor of our policies, or they can lend their resources or create a coalition party, but without having to be subsumed by our party in and of itself. There are so many alternatives if these individuals genuinely want to help, and we say that they can help from outside. Yes.
It's most likely that the people in these parties will be from that you accept and will be wanting to join you, be from the absolute extremities. Places where you need to make sure you show some change in order to make sure that the areas develop. How would you do that if you're rejecting them, backing them into a corner?
I'm not sure how you cannot reach all of these far-flung areas by ourselves as a political party. If we have been voted in because we are the new voice of the people and the people are in the far-flung areas, we probably also have a representative there. But if at worst that individual doesn't have, we don't have a representative there, we're okay. We can cooperate with that politician and keep checks and balances with that politician to make sure that politician creates better policies for his people and for his constituents. Last, why we need to analyze why we were voted in the first place. We say that we were voted in because we have a mandate to our people, not to big businesses, not to corrupt, selfish politicians. We say that when we accept these individuals, in principle, we are harming ourselves as our mandate to our voters, but we are also harming our mandate to our national government and to the nation in itself. Because we think that in the pursuit of a balanced interest, we think it is unstrategic politically for us to associate ourselves with bad politicians and bad party lists and bad businessmen.
Thank you very much. Diego?
I think there are 4 things that they get crucially wrong, which would make them lose this debate. First, they fail to realize that politics is not just about legislation, but also about controlling businesses and causing development. They have no analysis whatsoever on how to rein in those businesses and make them work for your favor, and kept accusing us of being in bed with those businesses, where we made it very clear in the first speech that we'll be the ones controlling it, because we'll be the ones choosing who to take and how much of those business interests to take and ratify, because they would be in our pockets as a ruling party. Second, they fail to understand that these political parties are ideologically not constant and there are variations and it's okay to take some of those people. Third, they fail to understand the incentive structures of those incumbent politicians and what incentives they have and what they're going to do when they're outside the party and disenfranchised from the political ruling system. Fourth, they fail to understand the context of which the voting happened, which is what I'm going to deal with first. First, let's realize that most of the constructives deal with this weird idea that all of the people now support the new ruling party and they have rejected the incumbent party. And this is categorically untrue. Because if you're talking about a party which has been in power for generations, for 16 long years, you don't overthrow all of that party in general. The most likely outcome is that you have a slight majority which allows you to take power, which means there are various places down on the ground where you don't have the sway of the people. How do you best take those people into your pockets? I don't think you do this by throwing all of those people out of the political system and calling them crooks and calling them a threat to your economy. I think the best way to take into those people is to collude with some of them as long as they agree with your ideological constraint. The second thing that they ignored in this chunk of analysis, which came from Raya, is that a lot of these rural areas are not based on which party that politician believes in, but based on what kind of things they do. Case in point, the district division of Borishal in Bangladesh had an MP from BNP all throughout, despite Awami League ruling for a long time. That's because the guy from BNP did a lot of things like building parks for children and etc. So no one would vote for the Awami League, despite of them being more ideologically inclined to Awami League, because they knew that person as a good man who did good things. In those instances, it's much better for you to support that good man, because that's how you keep the support of those people. Sit down, right? Right. But most of this, the second thing is the ideologies, right? Firstly, internally, both of these parties are not likely to be consistent because in those developing countries, that doesn't happen. But the second thing which makes this more likely is because this incumbent party has been in power for 16 or 20 or even more long years. What does this mean? It means that good, honest politicians who didn't agree with this party's principles and wanted to benefit the country in a different way, assuming that this incumbent party was corrupt and horrible, they had only one choice. One possible way to improve that country. They had to join that party despite not agreeing to their ideologies so that they could still push minute changes and try to change the mindset of those parties. This means that those people are likely to be the same people who your party would have had in different circumstances. These are people with similar ideologies, if not the same ideologies. It's perfect to take them, and it's even better because the constituents that those party members made friends with are now rightfully yours, and they shift hand right like that, and that's the best thing ever. The third thing is that they talk about legislature all the time, but they fail to realize something very important. The power of legislature, the power of these politicians in the opposition is much higher in terms of controlling how legislature works. Understand this, right? Firstly, they tell you that look, from within the party, essentially these people will have a say and sort of ruin or change party politics. We think this is highly unlikely because understand that these people would tend to be a minority, so they will have a voice because they do control business interests. But it's impossible for them to strongman you in order to take over the government. If they do have legit concerns, however, which reflect what the people on the ground want, it's likely that the new party will listen to them because they want to keep those people under control. But this analysis that they talk about, when they say that these people will take over the party from the inside, contradicts with their other assumption, in which they say that this will become an echo chamber of politics and legislature. Which is to say, if they claim that this party is an echo chamber which only listens to itself, they automatically invalidate their own constructive that they will listen to those rich businesses if they come within their own party. That makes no sense whatsoever. But why is it worse when these people fall on the wrong side of the party? Because we need to understand how the incentive structures of these incumbent politicians work. Firstly, we already talked about politicians who genuinely wanted to improve the country despite the clash in ideologies. Those people's incentive structures are much in our favor and they would like to join our party without any problems, right? But what are the people who want to join the political parties to keep power? What about these people who put their own people in police and other organizations and basically control the businesses? What do they want the most? I think the thing that they want the most is self-preservation because they want to keep at least some of their power, if not all of it. So what happens is that if you push these people out of the country, they're going to actively try to stop your politics because they know that the only way that they can get any semblance of control in the society is to take down your government and to set up their own government back in power. And this is horrible because realize that when you take down a government after 16 or 20 long years, you have a very short window of time on which you have to prove to the people that you're good. If you have this strong force in your country working against you, it means that you're likely going to fail to prove to these people that you can do some good, which means in the next elections you will never be re-elected because that incumbent party will now use that analysis again and again that your party has ideologies but is ineffective, much like how the left is characterized by the right in most opposite situations. This means that it's much better when they're inside the party, where they still look after their own interests, but they're not vindictive. So they push to a certain extent and get some concessions, but they will not vindictively stop your policies from taking effect. This is much more better. Yes?
Is across the aisle cooperation possible?
Of course it is, but in case of the particular situation we're talking about, where the opposition party is going to be hell-bent on taking you down because the only way these incumbent politicians keep power is by taking you down, I don't think cooperation will exist in that context. If you do manage to take some of those people in, even if these are not the top guns, even if these are the middle guns, what happens is that they have a significant say on trying to convert the opposition party now. So once some of the incumbent politicians are in your party, you can use those connections to create the cooperation, which is not existent in a context where these parties are vindictively and aggravatingly against each other. That is when cooperation across the aisle really happens. Not in your context when the vindictive motives exist very, very strongly. And that's essentially why that policy doesn't work. So legislation out of the way. Let's talk about the rest of the things, right? Because understand that usurpers not always do they make the best builders. Robert Baratheon won the war, right? But he couldn't really rule. That's the difference. And it's the same case for Baba Munda in Bangladesh. He won the liberation war because he was a great usurper. He wasn't a really good governor. The good governors exist with the ones who are with plenty of experiences within the government bodies who have all of those connections. So the best case scenario of their world is that you're going to have inexperienced politicians trying to push legislatures, losing against an incumbent opposition who know how to play the game, who know how to influence everyone, who know how to strip you out of all of your resources. Your legislature is probably all you're going to get, but these are never going to be implemented. You're never going to give these people economic benefit. And in the long run, you'll be proven as an ineffective party who doesn't deserve to get re-elected. This country will stay in the hands of the incumbent for the next future generations.
Thank you very much. Go good.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
The fundamental flaw that is going to make opposition lose this debate is that they've never proved why cooperation must only exist when they are members of our party and when they give them membership. So if it's true that they say that there are individuals who really want to cooperate and who just joined the party because this was the only incumbent party that would give them power, then we think these individuals, good intentions and all, will still cooperate with us, will still help us, will not require anything of us in return if that characterization is true. We think they'd have to prove that there's an exclusive benefit that arises from us allowing them into this party that will actually let us get the changes that they want. Two issues in this debate. First, where do we actually get change on the ground in the short term? But secondly, in the long term, where do we sustain that change such that we don't end up with the system we have now, where we have parties fighting to entrench themselves and to always be vindictive? First, where do we get change short term, passing bills, having resources, etc.? Opposition tells us it only happens when we get people who have control of the resources from the opposition party into our party. But we also want them to not be too ideologically misaligned. Because note how the speaker said if we're like anti-abortion and we're pro-abortion, we're also not going to accept them. Why is such a combination something that is unlikely? Because the more power you have in a party, it probably shows the more intensity your loyalty is, the more ideologically aligned you are, such that if they want individuals with the resources to go to our party, they are going to have to accept the trade-off that you are probably going to get the most conservative individuals, the people who are probably most misaligned, and the people who are most self-interested and entrenched in the current system, such that they want to protect that. That's why they're unlikely to get changed. But if they get people who are somewhat ideologically unaligned with your new party, these people are unlikely to have the resources and connections that they want to actually be able to have that change in the first place. Because if you are someone who's seen in the dynastic party, who is someone who's not loyal or aligned, or is not as cooperative with the policies, because you don't agree ideologically, you're unlikely to be bestowed the resources, the trust, or connections you even need to make the change. So you don't get either individuals to be able to make change, or if you do get them, these are individuals who are conservative such that they don't want to make the changes, even if they have that power. But fine, let's assume that these people do exist, that they are ideologically aligned with your party, and they have the resources. We think that they require something in return for you getting access to the resource and connection. And what that thing is membership, having a say in your own politics and your own ideology, such that it's unlikely that you're going to make any of the sweeping changes you even wanted to in the first place. Opposition has to accept the trade-off that the kind of nuanced individuals that they want are unlikely to exist, and if they do, are unlikely to be effective, such that the change they want in society is highly unlikely to happen in any circumstance. What is the comparative on our side? We said that the ability to establish relationships is not exclusive to actually accepting ex-members into your party. We think it is still highly likely and not improbable that businesses can be third parties or neutral individuals who cooperated with their government because it was literally the only government or only party that existed. And when you have a new one, they're just going to cooperate with you as well. Or the idea that because you are a less corrupt party, more people want to work with you, probably because they need less under-the-table deals, or you don't need to let ex-members in because you're more trustworthy. What this essentially means is your ability to garner connections, resources, and make changes is not dependent on you having ex-members in, but more than not being dependent, you having ex-members into your own party is actually an impediment to that change. Meaning, in the short term, where we are more likely to get changes is one where we maintain our ideological purity within ourselves and ensure that we maintain that trust towards the people and towards new connections that we might make. Secondly, they tell us is well, we need change because there are individuals in far-flung areas. There are sectors where we might not have majority control, where people don't even like us. But opposition needs to prove why. Simply because we are an opposition party, they will just end all be all, not cooperate with us. Even if A, we think our party is still willing to talk with them, to cooperate with them. The only thing we're not willing to do is to actually give them membership into our own party and let them use our name. Because even if they did not vote for us, we think if we are still able to provide benefits or show we are trustworthy, we don't think individuals are actually going to reject, I don't know, like social welfare programs or whatnot. But more than that, we ask, is across the aisle cooperation possible? Such that even if you're not a member, you're still willing to cooperate. And they said yes, that we can still have cross the aisle cooperation, meaning that their benefit is not exclusive in any way to us being able to grant them membership. But they said parties are vindictive such that they don't want to cooperate because we want to take individuals down. First, we don't think it's true that parties are vindictive, especially if your opposition party rose to power on the idea that we want to be fair. It's not just about taking down, but ensuring a balance of powers exists. But more than that, we think the only reason they are vindictive is to reach the end goal of making changes and ensuring people like them. And if across the aisle cooperation still reaches that goal of being able to make changes, of still having people like them, then we don't think that they're just going to outright reject cross-aisle cooperation because of that. That means opposition has no exclusive benefit coming from their side. Last thing, where do we sustain change for the long term? Because we think it is equally important in this debate to say that we do not want a system that will constantly rely on entrenching a party, deposing a party, and entrenching a party again. And we think opposition has clearly shown us the heart of that. But what happens if we follow opposition's plan is we think we still end up entrenching our own party again. Because what did they say? They said things like, well, we're now going to be able to be the ones to hoard these connections, to be the ones to take it all for ourselves. And we think this is still feeding into the dynastic system. And like my two argumentative speakers already told you, that's not what we want. We do not want to be a monolithic party that has all these resources and connections. We're fine if there are individuals who do oppose us from time to time, that we don't have all the resources in the world or all the connections. And we've got no response as to how you are able to break the cycle. Someone has to do it, and we think while we are in power, it is better that it is us.
Thank you very much. Okay. Cheers. Sorry. Are you using this debate?
No. You want it? I can use this. Here's one.
No, I think because if you were going to use it, then I won't have it.
Right. 3, 2, 1. It's telling that the government spent most of the majority of her speech telling you why our side policies and our benefits might not occur, while spending little to no time telling them why the policies and benefits that they talk about will actually accrue in the long term, right? Because you question that. She absolutely never explained to you why in the long term there is going to be any sort of positive benefit coming from the as in why people will be more likely to vote for go for short-term change in the sense that they will actually go for any sort of benefit in their side. Before moving on, there are 3 things that you need to understand in this debate. First, the incentive structure of the people and the parties involved here. So they tell us that the incentive structure of the party that comes into power is that they need to have some level of benefit for the individuals, that they want to make sure that they benefit the country as a whole. We think that's not true. Because understand, what's most important for the party that just came into power is to preserve that power for the longest period of time. For them, it's most important that they show the short-term change in the most effective way possible. And that is what we'll be deconstructing right now. So she tells us, look, in the short term, if the individuals are defective, which means these people are unlikely to be strong supporters, which means they're ideologically not likely to be as important. Understand this. supporters in regions which are not as strong to the party are still supporters who will still have power, which is the incumbent party supporters in areas where we don't have a majority are still going to be in power, which means they can resist the implementation of changes that we want to continue in these areas because they can simply misuse and misallocate the resources and then blame our opposition party for not having given them enough resources to do the work there, right? That simply means that we will simply not be able to achieve this long-term change, because for achieving that long-term change, we need the opposition, we need the incumbent party supporters to support something that they won't do. Why? Because understand, you are backing them into a corner. Because if your party is constantly competing against them in elections and they show that under your party's regime, their their constituents are getting better because they are doing good work for this constituents, it means that your party has to be supported. If your party has to be supported, it means that the politicians that you endorse in that area should be the one that is supported, which means their regime and their reign of power inside those territories, inside those areas are under threat, which means they're far more likely to resist short-term change inside those areas, which means you are far more less likely to get those changes. Understand, these are the areas we need to show us most short-term change in, because the area that we have already won are already going to vote for us anyway, right? There's no point going for those areas. Those areas will eventually work out anyway, so we don't need to go for them to begin with. Then they tell us, look, we want to have, we believe that any sort of transparency will allow us to garner businesses and allow us to get them into our side and make us work better. They clearly don't understand how businesses work. Sit down. These businesses are infiltrated by political people, and in most cases, there are a lot of political connections to begin with. Understand, the moment of time that you back off and make sure that none of these political parties are able to come into power, and you show that you have a strong vehemence towards making sure that the incumbent party doesn't get any say whatsoever inside the political party, that the political landscape that you are creating, it means that these businesses which were aligned to the political party to begin with, these businesses will not be likely to work with you either, because you are currently being absolutely apathetic and antipathic to that party to begin with, which means they're far less likely to be cooperative with you, because you are taking the stance of not helping out with them. But understand, they tell us that we don't need this business to begin with. And that's wrong, because you need these businesses, because in the short term, these businesses are the ones which hold the power in order to have the economic development of the country to begin with. In the long term, you can foster independent businesses which are far more transparent. But in the short term, you cannot have that happen. Understand, they tell us that across the aisle cooperation will be something that's not possible, because apparently we will not be able to do something. They will not be able to work with us. And we tell you, across that cooperation might not be possible. Inside the party, cooperation is far better. Why? Well, understand, inside the party, when people question your methods, one, it's far less likely to be public, right? It's far more likely that you're going to be able to question within your party and resolve disputes within your party, which means it's going to less likely become a scenario for the public to gain back, which means your party looks less weak if you are able to resolve this thing inside your own party. It's very important, because if it becomes a national issue, then they can simply be framed out of your hands. This been seen this in continuous times in Turkey and in lots of other specific scenarios in Germany. Understand, across the aisle cooperation being the focus will always be a dangerous concept. How do we use this business danger? Actually, businesses must be used by making sure that you give these people and keep the essential supporters happy, making them feel like they will be taken care of. How do you make sure that they're taken care of? By showing them that you are going to be able to provide short-term change too. With short-term change, we should ideologically provide and making sure we tell these people that, look, we are giving you the benefits right now, because in the long term, we are willing to cooperate with the existing members of the opposition party. Even if we consider the idea that the ideologically backed supporters, the strongest party members, will not be the ones that come over to our side of the house, our side of the party. These people will at least not be in a strong state that they'll be able to oppose us consistently, right? They will not be able to oppose us consistently because they're showing that they're willing to work with the businesses right now. For them to have won, they need to show to us that this won't be true. Then they tell us that, look, this association will be permanent, that anyone that comes over to your party will have identity that is permanent. We don't believe that is so, because if these people simply renounce the identity and we simply accept them based on the renunciation of their identity, it is far less likely that the identity will come and carry over with them. Because at the end of the day, this identity in itself is something that's not permanent. What is permanent, however, is the ability of these people to work changes, to have connections inside these businesses which are not in transition, which work in the long term primarily because these businesses have found these politicians to be loyal. More importantly, these places have found these politicians to be loyal, right? Which means they can work in the long term because of these things. But lastly, let's explain to you how the supporters you have taken in actually work better. Because understand, the supporters you've taken are far more likely to be
if your problem is incumbent leaders starving their region and blaming it on our party, prove that firstly, they would even want membership to our party, and secondly, how it solves it.
Understand? One, they will want membership because they want to make sure that the party that they've just lost power with, the incumbent party, isn't something that they go down with. They will want to make sure that they stay in the party that stays in the power for the long time. This means they are far more likely to want to be with you. However, the moment of time that you reject them, you are backing them into a corner because they realize the only way they will have power under your party and your party is ruling is if they usurp your party and make sure that they destroy the party so that the incumbent party comes back into power. This means that they will be far less likely to cooperate with your party and do good work for your party, right? Which means you're far less likely to get them to work. As I already told you, this is how we get the supporters here again for the better, right? Because they want to make sure that they have self-preservation and they're walking the corner, which means that they destroy the party. If you allow these people to come in, and you are going to allow them, because these parties have paranoia, the opposition party that comes into power is going to diagnose them and vet them so that they don't take the supporters that are going to be ideologically swing the entire nation towards themselves and towards the incumbent party supporters. That is why in the long term, we will have positive change. They tell us that the mandate to our people is to make sure that we don't hurt them by keeping the other party in power. Which is the mandate to our people is to make sure that we give them what they want and got our party into power for. They sacrifice a short-term change because no amount of transparency will replace the political connection that these people have built up in the long term. Because for this connection to have been built up, we need some level of party for them to believe in our party. But that belief doesn't exist at all unless we give them a reason to believe in us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll reply.
It's funny that as far as government is concerned, burdens only exist on one side of this debate, which is to say, they consistently push us burdens like we have to show how cooperation happens, we have to show how things happen and improvements happen. Whereas they never really showed you any mechanism or any process in which their party members, alienated and faced with an aggravated opposition incumbent party who still owns the majority of resources in the country, will somehow radically generate that cooperation across the aisle, because they never really showed you how they appease the parts of those parties which want self-preservation. Something that we did very well and something that proves that they shall never take this degree. Let's first understand what they did show, right? They showed us a bunch of principles and assertions devoid of context and characterization. And every time you put in context and characterization, these ideas fell. Because they first told you that there were ideological differences without any context and characterization. When we put in that context and characterization, talk about the liberal guy in Albany, talk about those individuals who wanted to do change, and the only reason they're in that party right now is because that was their only option, and they would shift if they want to, that argument falls. When you add context, that goes away. The second is the will of the people. Ignoring that in some rural places, people vote for politicians because of who they are as people and what they've done as people, not based on party politics. So the will of the people is still represented. If anything, you gain more constituents on one side. Add characterization, that argument of theirs falls as well. Third is bad people go in because the worst of the worst comes in. Ignoring the characterization that some of these people really do want to go change, right? So these are the good people that come in. But also ignoring the characterization that the top guns sometimes want to preserve power and would want to go into those parties and if necessary change their stances to be more aligned with those parties because they want at least some level of preservation as opposed to a world where they have to constantly fight and stop party politics for it to happen. And characterization, that goes on as well. And I don't think they can show us that across the aisle cooperation will happen. Because the only thing that they can show is that the good guys we described are going to try to cooperate. But how far, right? When the real party that they ideologically identifies with alienates them on every step of the way and say that you are not welcome, how far will those people be willing to cooperate? But more importantly, we also established that most of those parties are those people who own the businesses, who have self-preservation as their interest. How do you get cooperation from that side of the house? At characterization, their cooperation argument goes away. The fifth idea is the businesses. And they forget what a 16-year-old stronghold of the government can do to businesses. Because not only do those businesses cooperate with you, you also have your inside men into those businesses. People in high positions of power, which you can't just throw away, and they can't just change their allegiances just if they want to. At characterization, that goes away. They don't have businesses on their side. What did they clearly misunderstand in this debate? That the incumbents are far from gone. And that's why they will lose this debate. Because they forget the intense power of these people who hold hold a huge chunk of seats in opposition party, who hold the ability to filibuster, who hold the ability to stop discussions, who hold the ability to vindictively drain the government of the resources by not ensuring that people other people do tax evasions and whatnot, by ensuring that the political connections they have and they held as the incumbent party don't translate into this new government, by starving them out of connections, by starving them out of benefits that come from those corporations. If that's the case, how do they really show us that change really happens in their side of the house when this sabotage happens from the outside, from the incumbents, unless you can appease them to a certain extent? But then they throw us this huge mischaracterization saying that we have to appease them completely. We don't. These guys are desperate for a deal, and they want to take whatever they can to have some level of self-preservation. But even if we fail to take in the resources, what do we have? We have an analysis of how these usurpers are not necessarily the best rulers, not necessarily the people with connections, not necessarily the people with experience. The people, like these good politicians from the incumbent party across the aisle can support you maybe in some legislation, but they can't support you in ways of governance, which you desperately need because you are a couple of politicians who've never come into power before. For 16 years of experience, you've been brought out of. You're probably new politicians who have no experience whatsoever. They never really show to us why these people will be effective politicians, why they would have experience, and why the ideological differences will get them through and make them in this debate.
Thank you very much. To conclude this round of rebuttal.
Opposition is going to lose this debate because they also did not respond to their own characterizations and the setup of the context that they wanted to make this debate in. Because if they said that, one, that we exist because we have social capital as a new majority party, then that means that to some extent it is true that we do not need these individuals to jump ship to us, because we say that if these individuals want to remain in power and we have the will of the people, then we say that it is also likely that they will want to keep cooperating and create across the aisle cooperation to make sure they're able to serve their people. They never took down the idea that cooperation is possible and cooperation can happen. Because if both sides want to remain in power and they don't have the option of coming in, opposition assume that the automatic response is to be vindictive. And we say that isn't true. Because if insofar as our party does not accept them but is willing for them to create their own party as a new or create an independent standing party for themselves, we say that there's cooperation across the aisle, and that cooperation can result in them remaining in power regardless of where in these far-flung areas they are. The first thing we want to deal with is consistency of opposition model. Note how government was so clear that regardless of who these individuals are, they have been branded as being part of an institution that is no longer favorable to people. Because people have branded these politicians as a part of an establishment that does not listen to the will of the people. Hence, they voted for us as the opposition. They said that, you know what, we need to accept that they won't be vindictive. And we need to accept that they will be vindictive if we don't accept them. But at the same time, they're willing to selectively accept people. So what happens to their far-flung areas in which these politicians get rejected entry? So we say that the same harms is accrued under their side. But the fact that it is selective means that you still have worse harms, because like, why am I being denied access when someone else was granted access? So you see that inconsistency of principle and application of the harm means that, one, they don't solve the harm under their side, but we say the alternative of cooperation across the aisle, regardless of where you are in this country, means that it's still likely for them to cooperate with us. But last, we think that on the issue of businesses, there's a tension under their side. They say that these politicians are loyal to these businesses, but somehow when they jump ship, they will no longer be loyal to these businesses, and we can control them as a new political party. What is true? We're not sure which value of that claim can be the most achieved in this debate. Is it true that businesses control these politicians, Or is it true that we control these businesses? We say that you cannot have both claims and launch an argument based on that assumption that was not true. We said that it is more likely that the reason why these businesses keep these politicians in their pocket is because they want to profit out of these politicians. And especially in the context of developing worlds and third world countries, that is especially true. We think that politicians and governments rarely ever have power over these businesses, and that is more unlikely to change under their side. If they said that as a goal, we don't want to be in the pockets of these politicians, it is unlikely achieved under their side. Last, we think that in terms of engagement, they clearly lose this debate because they say that incumbents are powerful, but they're also not so powerful. So how powerful are they? If they're powerful enough to take us down, do we have that majority that we claim to have? If they agree that we do have that majority, then it's probably not true that these incumbents are powerful. But we say that if the remaining power is, according to Prime Minister, would mean multi-sectoral cooperation from across the aisle, we say that that is a possibility that they have not disproven in this debate. But if this is about alienation, they assumed under opposition model that alienation is an automatic effect. Never mind that the only way that they don't feel alienated is from coming into our party. Never proved why that automaticity exists. So we say that because we are still willing to work with them, and if they don't work with us, they also penalize their own people and make their people suffer. That is why they are less likely as politicians to make unfavorable policies that don't benefit their people as well. So if both sides want to benefit their people, because that's the only way to stay at power, then we say that cooperation is the solution, not to be vindictive as opposition claims.
Thank you very much for that debate. Please close the door and you can exit the room. Okay, by the way,